And Hayley, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi guys. Well, I would say nice to see you all, but I can't actually see any faces at the minute. But nice to have you all here. As been said, I'm Hayley, and I'm in PepsiCo Design and Innovation team, now in the UK office. And we'll get into my journey a little bit later, but I have been in PepsiCo for almost 8 years now, traveling from the New York office, then to the Dublin global headquarters, and now have been in the UK team for about 2 years now. So again, nice to meet you all, and we'll give you some insights on my career path and what we do at PepsiCo throughout this session.
Cool. Thanks, Hayley. So let's get started right away. I think first question for me is just tell me about your job a bit and what it means to be a senior design manager, and furthermore, like what types of brands are you working on within PepsiCo?
Sure. So first thing to just introduce PepsiCo Design. Obviously the name is PepsiCo. So first thing that everybody thinks of is Pepsi. But actually at PepsiCo, we manage a bunch of brands, and we're actually the top foods company in the world. So we've got both beverages and foods, including all of the Eatos, I like to call them. So Cheetos, Doritos, Tostitos, um, and more. So Lay's, Walkers, all sorts of different regional smaller brands. And then on the beverage side of things, we've got obviously Pepsi as sort of our crown jewel and our favorite brand to work on. But we've got 7-Up, Mountain Dew, Gatorade, and Rockstar energy drink, and loads of other sort of local beverages that we work on as well. My role is specifically on brand Pepsi. So, as I mentioned, I started in New York, and I was focused more on regional brands when in my New York role. So I worked on more US brands in the tea category. So you might be familiar with Lipton or Brisk, Pure Leaf Tea. But in the past 5 years, I've been really focused on brand Pepsi. So again, sort of the big brand of the company. And I've kind of chosen to stay with Pepsi because there's just so much work on the brand going on at the minute. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but recently we've gone through a big redesign. And I've got a little prop here to show you, but this is our more recent Pepsi can. So our previous design was not as iconic, but we've recently transitioned back into the look of the 70s and 80s Pepsi look and feel. And that was based on some consumer insights where everybody really just recognized the brand as it looks kind of here. Again, kind of harping back to the 70s and 80s. So my role recently has really been focused on developing that look and feel and rolling that across our regions in the UK and Europe. Um, and that role really extends across everything that you can imagine visually for the brand. So packaging, out of home and advertising. So what campaigns might look like when you do a collaboration with Subway or Taco Bell. And then into things like merchandise as well, which again, I'm wearing one of my favorite Pepsi jumpers that we've
That's awesome.
designed in the UK. So we work on everything from pack to clothing to billboards and advertising to digital and social engagement. So my role is very much top line kind of across the brand, and then directing our designers and kind of applying their skill sets to the various different applications of the brand. And equally kind of pushing the marketing teams and the business to think design forward and really think about the consumer. So as opposed to just, you know, creating cheesy taglines and talking about our brand in kind of an expected way, we're always trying to push the business to think creatively and think out of the box, and also express the brand in very locally relevant ways. So I'd say in a bigger picture, that is the kind of substance of my day-to-day and my role at Pepsi.
Cool. Really cool. And do you have a favorite brand that you're working for within Pepsi?
I mean,
Personally?
Pepsi.
Pepsi. And,
Pepsi's been my favorite. So,
and sweatshirt.
I mean, I will expand on that because when I first joined the London team, I worked a little bit on Rockstar energy drink. And Rockstar is an energy drink that was launched in the US in 1993. and it was very locally relevant. So it was launched in LA. It had this whole rock star mentality that was very that really resonated with consumers in the 90s, but does not resonate with Europeans or people in the UK, and not really currently as well. So when I first joined the London team, we had a big initiative to push Rockstar Energy Drink to break out of that sort of barrier and connect with the consumers in Europe. And we've just redesigned Rockstar Energy Drink as well. So I'd say that I've got a lot of passion for that brand as well, because it's a much smaller brand, and it was maybe 4% of our business previously, but now is gaining market share, and that's all due to design, really. So I'd say I've got heart for a lot of our brands, but Pepsi is the most fun. And that is my focus at the minute. So
Cool. That's great. Yeah, and it sounds like such a cool challenge to be able to work with Rockstar and try to redesign and rebrand it for Europe is an amazing journey. So tell me a bit about how did you get into this level to work for such a globally recognized company? Like, what was your journey like?
it's been an interesting journey. So as I mentioned before, I started in the New York design team, and that is where the design and innovation function for PepsiCo was born. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with PepsiCo as a company, but PepsiCo, the former CEO was called Indra, and she was an incredible woman, and basically reached out to Mauro Porcini, who has a pretty big presence in the design community, and he started our function in New York City. So when I began in the company, it was about 65 of us in design, and we're now about 450. So, and that's in the past 7 years. So it's been a huge growth. And 5 years ago, they announced that they were moving our global headquarters from New York City to Dublin. I had never been to Ireland in my entire life. So I actually put my hand up and said, I will move to Ireland, and no one else did. So I ended up moving with the company from New York to Dublin in 2019 and helping to open the Dublin headquarters. So my experience in design suddenly went from being a packaging expert to being an architect, an interior designer, a team building expert. And I was consulting things like where to put the coffee machine and whose desk should go where and how to make the flow of the office work for everybody. So, I mean, when I say my career was accelerated by moving to another country, I mean, it was on many levels that I really had to kind of push myself and go from being a designer who really focused on the graphics and the packaging to being a designer that thought about team structure, culture, how to bring the culture from New York City to Dublin. And again, the kind of space that we were working in, how do we make that an exciting space for creatives to thrive in? And so that was really the first step that really pushed my career into more senior roles. And I will say some designers prefer to stay designing, which is completely okay in your career path. If you really want to be a designer that it stays on the tools, continues to work in Illustrator and Photoshop and build beautiful creative, that's one path. I think my path, I really decided I wanted to be a big picture kind of person. I really love mentoring and helping creatives kind of find their stride. So I took that leap when I moved to Dublin, and that was the first big step I took. And then I think for the London team, it was very similar. We didn't have a design team based in London, believe it or not. And so I planted that seed in the business and said, if you're ever opening a London office, I'd love to be a part of it. And that actually happened. So when they decided to build the London team, they reached out to me directly and said, would you like to come join and help do the same here and build the office, build the space, find the people, and kind of like build that creative team here. So that's what I just did 2 years ago. Moving again to London, helping build the space, designing the space, building murals within the design office, and have been hiring and kind of nurturing the team here. So again, that was kind of my leap from being a designer where I was really working on the graphics to then kind of being more of a people manager. And that's where I've taken that next step.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you really just kind of put your hand up and took opportunities as they came to you, and also okay to wear many different types of hats and really like grind at different types of roles to get where you're at today. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Wearing the different hats is kind of the main point of that. I think
Yeah,
the
yeah,
willingness and also the curiosity
yeah,
and willingness to kind of learn outside of your comfort zone was kind of what brought me to where I am today was, being okay to not know the answers to things or not really know the path forward was a big part of my development, was saying, I don't know how to do this, but I'm okay to take this move, take the risk myself, and ask questions and just kind of have the business help me learn further.
yeah.
So,
Cool. I've got
yeah.
one or two more questions for you, and then we're going to move to the questions from all those in the call. I see Anthony has posted a couple questions here for everybody else. We're here for you. Anthony, no problem. You've got a bunch of questions. It's great. I love it. We're here for everybody that's in the call. So, post the questions that you have, anything that's on your mind that you wish you could ask somebody who's senior in their position. Now's the time. We've got 45 minutes to talk about it. So I would love to see some questions come in. Hayley, what recommendations would you have for people that are just entering the workforce now? And I guess tied to that is, what do you look for when you're hiring people? I think they're kind of one and the same question from your perspective and from their perspective.
Absolutely. I would say the number one thing is curiosity. So I think seeing enthusiasm and the willingness to ask questions, and to be curious and kind of admit that you might not know the answer is probably the number one trait. Especially in PepsiCo, I would just say from our company perspective, there is not necessarily a type of person that we tend to hire. However, I would say the common theme would be that kind of willingness to not be afraid to speak, or ask the questions that when you don't know what you're doing or what you're there for. And that's probably the biggest quality. Again, I think passion for design is a big one as well. And just kind of showcasing that through being able to voice your opinions fearlessly. Those would be sort of the top things for us. I think again, it might not be reflected in your portfolio. We're not very skills based when we hire. I think it's really personality and willingness to be open and
Mhm.
curious and inspired.
Cool. Yeah, cool. That's really inspiring. That's awesome. Let's move to a couple questions. I'm going to start with Anthony because he posted a question first here. So what design learnings did you take away from your time breaking into the UK market for Rockstar? And they say, I've always wondered how it would be to tackle breaking into a new market like that, or a new audience.
Mm. It's a good question. I think the first thing that we did when really looking at Rockstar as a brand and trying to break apart why we might not be resonating with UK or European consumers was, what is that big brand idea? And how are we resonating with consumers? And again, I think the positioning of Rockstar previously was all about this like actual rock star mentality. It was very black and gold and almost masculine and not very relatable for the demographic. So, I mean, our first step was really to look at, who are we trying to speak to? Who are the people that we want to buy this brand, and why would they want to buy it? So
Hmm.
those are the questions we ask ourselves is, who are we trying to target? And I think what we found from that was there is a big insight of consumers these days. A lot of Gen Z is moving away from drinking, and energy drinks are sort of that replacement.
Hmm.
So Rockstar could play that role of, we want to go out tonight, but we don't drink. So we're going to buy a Rockstar. And that is the transition from your day to day into the play moment of your day.
Cool.
So I think for Rockstar in particular, we really tried to land that insight, like, why are consumers going to buy this? And then from there, we took that into the design language. So breaking down the barriers of being black and gold and very masculine, we were like, we need to introduce color. We need to introduce flavor. And Rockstar actually had a big portfolio of flavors that we weren't really showcasing in the best way. And with those flavors, you can create an entire rainbow of colors. And I think by leaning into the color stories, you almost create these flavor profiles that's like, I love blueberry. I love the blue resonates with me, or the
That's cool.
pink one resonates with me, or the
Yeah.
green one. And so by kind of creating this playful moment for consumers, that was our big design angle. It was like, let's take it away from just being black and gold. Like we really should play up our flavors and the diversity of our consumers and use that as a design tool to kind of push the brand further.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really, really cool. I love that perspective, and Anthony did as well. He said, "Well, I never thought about that." So that's great. I'm glad that we got something, a good perspective out of it. Tell me, there's another question that's Anthony. I might be able to get back to your second question a bit later, but there's another question from Nyanika that I think is related to that in some way, which is how do you maintain brand consistency throughout communication, different, in different regions, especially where English is not the dominant language. So, you're working across all of Europe. English might not be the dominant language, and you have to create a brand that meets all those requirements. How do you do that?
Oh gosh. Well, that is a great one to unpick. I would say my previous role did sit in the global team. So when I was in the global team, I tackled that problem every single day. And my first way of approaching that was creating sort of a design community that existed across the region. So every week I would have a call with China. I would have a call with Thailand. I would have a call with Latin America and our partners in Mexico City. And I would do these calls to kind of create this open forum of not necessarily any agenda on the call, but like, what are you guys dealing with on the day to day? Like, what are your problems? How is your market responding to what we're doing with brand Pepsi? And we created this open forum where they would come, and sometimes we didn't have that much to talk about, but like we would learn about, oh, there's a festival happening in Argentina, and this is what Pepsi's doing there. And I think that was my biggest objective, was sort of gathering all of this information and really being connected to the people. Because at the end of the day, as a big brand, what you need to keep in mind is the people. It's all about brand love comes from the real connection and not necessarily from the big brand idea, I guess. So again, it was about breaking down the barriers and just trying to really hear from each market what their challenges were, what they need to communicate. And I think the biggest objective right now with Pepsi, especially with the redesign, is being globally consistent whilst being locally relevant. And it's a really tough challenge. So it's like you can keep your brand colors the same, but the way you communicate needs to vary across markets. And I think it's about kind of nailing down what those big kind of overarching ideas are that you always kind of refer back to. Your judgment criteria is what we like to call it. And your judgment criteria is that you always want to have a little bit of wittiness, a little bit of playfulness, but that is going to be different in Mexico than it is in London or wherever you are. So again, it's about having some flexibility, but keeping certain things consistent.
Yeah, wonderful. I, it's not a participant question, but just tagging on that, when you say that you're hearing from customers or client base based on the brand, what does that mean in actuality? Are you getting reports from consultancies, or is part of the team on the ground having discussions with people? Are you looking at sales numbers? Like, how are you actually translating? How are you understanding what people feel about the brand in a real day-to-day basis?
So as I mentioned at the beginning, the New York team was sort of the start of PepsiCo Design. We do now have 17 different locations around the world. So my first point of contact would be people in each of those design offices. So when I say I was connecting with each of those markets, it would usually first be with design. However, PepsiCo, as a big company, does like to do a lot of testing. So normally we have insights partners in each of those regions, and that is sort of what we tune into. Is we do a lot of testing, like how would this visual resonate with consumers versus this visual, and by connecting with my design partners in each of those regions, I would sort of get that background information. But more importantly, I think the objective of our design function was really to expand and have offices in as many regions as possible so that we can have people on the ground that really understand the culture. And we're not just speaking from one point of view.
Hmm, cool. Yeah, that's very interesting. It sounds like, having a global team is getting you those insights and really kind of connections to the ground and to what people are actually experiencing. Um, I'm not sure about this person's name. It's labeled as X. Is it hard to strike a work-life balance when you had to move countries for a company, and are working on things like billboards and merchandise? I mean, how have you struck a work-life balance?
Hmm, it's a good question. I won't lie. I think A, getting older, B, COVID. I think there's a lot of factors that have contributed to the way people work. Um, I will say, in my experience in the European and UK markets and offices, we've had a much easier balance with work-life balance than I did in New York. I don't know if I haven't been back, so I don't know what the work-life balance would be there, but I will say that I've got a pretty hard rule personally where I start a little bit earlier than I used to, but I always finish my day by 6 p.m. And I think it's really important to sort of close the laptop, close the thinking. And I usually go to a workout class or do something different after work to kind of have that work-life balance and separation from the thinking and the ongoing thoughts that you might have through the day. And I have found that we were able to stick to that in my current team. And no matter how busy the day is, we always say, you know what, if we've not tackled it today and we've not solved it today, sometimes putting it away and then coming back to it tomorrow fresh is totally fine. And I'm yeah, I'm a big pusher of like, let's push the deadline if we don't feel like we can hit it. And if we need to rest, we rest. And so I actually feel like our team is able to kind of strike that balance quite well. Um, I think it's a cultural thing though. It depends on where you're living, but I haven't been able to find that pretty well in Europe and the UK. So
Yeah, it sounds like a great team to work for. To be able to stop at 6 is great. I need to learn the same thing.
Mm, mm, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick 10 minutes to talk about ArtBound Initiative, and then I'm going to come back to the questions. I know there's still some questions here that haven't been finished yet. It's going to be really short. We're going to talk about our program, but most of this conversation is going to be focused on your questions for Hayley. So I see your question, Desiree. I see your question, Nala. We're going to come back to it, and I would love to, if anybody else has further questions, it's great. It helps the conversation flow. Put them here in the chat so that we can get to it. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Hopefully my presentation works well this time. So ArtBound Initiative, I'm going to talk about who we are. We are a global career accelerator for creatives. So we focus on internship placement within the creative industries specifically. Our goal is to help you break into the creative industries, which are so insular, and get your career started. We're going to talk about what we do briefly and the types of industries that we work within. So our program includes 4 key components. You're going to get personalized coaching and professional development from coaches that work in the creative industry, from creative directors, if you're in the creative side, from fashion designers, if you're in the fashion side. And we're going to work on your resume, on your portfolio, on your career goals, and preparing you for the workplace. You're going to get a guaranteed internship placement if you're accepted into the program. So we do guarantee an internship placement in your destination and field of choice. If you're accepted, you do need to go through an admissions process. You get personalized support all the way through a dedicated advisor who's going to help you out from the moment you join into the program all the way through your internship. We're there by your side, including travel, visa, insurance, housing, all the components needed to make sure that you're settled and ready to go, events. And then last, we've got a network. So we have a network of over 800 alumni that have been through the program, and non-alumni in our network, that are there, for you to connect with, for you to start your career, for you to, build connections with. We're sharing a lot of cool information there, job resources, from our partner companies. It's just a great thing to be a part of. So we've got destinations in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles in the US. So if you're looking to do, an internship in the US, we've got those 3 destinations. In Europe, we have Berlin. And then in Australia, we've got Melbourne and Sydney. And for those of you who can't travel, don't wish to travel, in a school year, not able to travel to one of these cities, we have a really robust virtual program as well. So you can do our program virtually from anywhere around the world, and get an internship with some of these great companies. We have industries in 5 different industries. So today we're talking, with Pepsi. Of course, that's very design related, but we've got advertising, communications, and marketing. But we also do entertainment and media. So if you're looking to do film or TV production, script development, video editing, VFX, we've got it. Fine arts, if you want to do, artist studio management, or working with an artist gallery, doing fine arts marketing. We've got that as well. Design, as I mentioned, graphic design, motion design, animation, and others. And then we have fashion. So fashion styling, wholesale, PR, and marketing. So lots of great internship opportunities. I've just mentioned most of them, but I'm going to put them up here just for a moment so you can see. So everything from fine arts, marketing and advertising, fashion design, entertainment, and media. Those are our focuses. What differs us from other internship programs is we're specialized in these fields. So we've got great connections and company connections here. We've got coaches. So you do get coaching as part of the program, as I mentioned. We've got coaches, as you can see, from Warner Bros, Omnicom, Guggenheim, Vice. A lot of really cool people for you to connect with and get advice from. It's a great place for you to, figure out kind of how to navigate your career and get advice from people who have already done it, and are going to give you personalized one-on-one time. Placement. So we've got guaranteed internship placement. It ranges from 3 to 6 months are options. You can do it for academic credit or for non-credit. Either way is fine. We work with a variety of different company partners. We have company partners that have paid internships. We have company partners that have unpaid internships and do just for credit. It's big industry out there. We work with both, so we cannot guarantee that we'll get you a paid internship, but we can guarantee an internship placement. Just a few, examples of some companies that we work with. Factory PR, an advertising agency in LA. They're doing PR, marketing, social media, and account management. Really, really cool firm. We've got DMA, which is a great creative agency out of New York. They're doing graphic design, animation work, motion graphics, art direction, content creation, and marketing. Picture North is a production studio out of Chicago. Production, post-production, and then administration within production. So they're doing some really cool work if you're in the entertainment sector. And then Studio Avanti, another creative agency in Berlin, doing art, art direction, animation, graphics design. So these are just a few examples of some companies that we work with. We've got over 300 company partners that we work with to make it happen. Travel support, you've got visa handled by us, insurance handled by us, housing arrangements handled by us. Housing is optional. All 3 of those I just mentioned are external third-party fees, but we do help you to arrange it and make it happen, and make it easy for you. We've got ABI, our ArtBound Initiative pre-trip information packages and a city orientation once you land. And then we've got events with everybody that's in that city to make it really cool and fun. You've got continued support all the way through. As I mentioned, you've got a coordinator that's going to help you from start to finish. And then we've got an in-city coordinator there to do those local meetups and also be there as emergency contact. And as I mentioned before, you have a community. So it's an app. You've got a lifetime membership to that. As soon as you join and accept into the program, you've got everyone, that's in the program currently and has been through the program for you to connect with. You've got all of our resources there, including job resources, further events, and career resources. I'm going to touch quickly on our tuition. We are a tuition-based program since we have a curriculum, and we're guaranteeing internship placement for our local and virtual programs, meaning if you're doing it domestically in the same country that you're in, or you're doing our virtual program, it's $2,250 US dollars. And then for our international program, because we have that additional support and visa processing, it's $3,250 US. That includes the internship placement, the travel support, the coaching, and the network. We've got a couple payment options for you just to make things easy. You can pay it in 30 days or you can pay in installments. And how to apply. We've got an application form online. First thing to do is just go to artboundinitiative.com. I think Kanya is going to post some information in the chat. You can check your eligibility with us to make sure you're eligible for the program, because we do have some requirements. And then we'll set you up for an interview and application process. And afterwards, you'll receive a decision of whether or not you're admitted in. If you're planning to do an internship in the summer, or in the fall, excuse me, if you're planning to do an internship this fall, then you'll need to apply about 3 months out before your internship start date. Our summer internships are already closed. If that's something that you're looking to do, we have a final deadline on February 15th. So right now we are still accepting applications for our fall internships, or if you're in Australia, for Australian summer. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing screen now. Hold on a second. There we go. And Hayley, we're going to go back to you. I'm glad we got a chance just to talk briefly. Guys, you can find out the information in the chat and follow up with us there to either book a consultation or to check your eligibility online. Cool. So let's go back to the questions here. Desiree asked, what responsibilities do you love about being a design manager? Like, what would a day in the life look like for you?
Good question. So I think I saw another question as well, which maybe this will hit both of them, but I will say that being a design manager is very much about the people and a lot less about the actual design sort of creation. So I think I've mentioned that a little bit before, but I used to be very much on the tools, as they call it, working in Illustrator and Photoshop and like working through all of the graphic development. And I did take that step and made that choice to sort of go into more managing people. My day-to-day is a lot of talking, but fun talking most of the time. I'd say it's a good balance between sort of managing the team and doing creative reviews. So sort of going through our biggest projects and doing, an hour session with all of our creative team, working through what they need to develop further and what they need to do to kind of hit the deadlines for the business. And then a balance of that with sort of working with the business to then kind of negotiate what we want to do for design. So I like to call it being like a design politician or diplomat, because a lot of the job is sort of negotiating or pushing the agenda and sort of finding that design narrative that we like to kind of bring everybody on the journey with. So you might get a brief for a certain project, and a lot of my day-to-day would be negotiating the brief, pushing the brief to be more design centric, and then sort of guiding the creative team to sort of hit all of the deliverables that we're looking for. But it's a good balance between working with the design team and working with the business and sort of the liaison between those two, which is why I like to call it like a politician job. Yeah, but a lot of calls.
A lot of calls, yeah. I think this goes straight into another question I have from Nala that's really related. So, Nala said, you mentioned that as a senior design manager, you do more people managing, which they captured correctly. Is there anything you missed in your tasks or project list back when you became a manager, or back before you became a manager, excuse me?
Sure. Yeah, that's a common question that I do get a lot. And I'll just give you a personal example of sort of two different ways a career can go. Because right now I actually have just hired the other senior design lead within my team, and we both graduated the same year at university. And I would say her name's Karina. Karina graduated and was the top of our class. Like, her portfolio was immaculate, beautifully designed, and she's always been very in the detail. And like I said, we graduated the same year, and we now both work at PepsiCo. She actually also worked at PepsiCo Dublin and has now followed me to PepsiCo London. So really cool story, but it's a really good example of two creatives that took two different paths. And
Mhm.
Karina has always wanted to stay in the design process, and she loves working on design and typography, packaging, very graphic oriented, very detail oriented, while I chose another path, which is to be more people oriented, big idea oriented, and kind of business oriented. And I think it's a good comparison because we both graduated the same year. We're both kind of in similar but different roles. And I think for myself, I did choose to kind of walk away from doing as much design, but she's chosen to kind of keep
Mhm.
within that world. Um, and it's a good example of how your career can kind of shape into two different paths. And for me, I consciously chose to kind of move away from doing as many design oriented roles. But I'm quite happy with that. So that was a conscious choice. Um, I will say that on on occasion, I'll find a project that I really latch onto and I want to be a part of, and I will have that design influence. And sometimes I will get into the detail with the team and, get into the design process a little bit more. But that's kind of as and when. And I'd say that's maybe like 10 to 15% of my role, while
Mhm.
the rest of my time is very much like the talking, the directing, managing the business, managing the team. Um, but again, just to compare, Karina and I have been in the industry the same amount of time, and I'd say that she's like 90% design. So
Cool.
there's
Okay.
two
So
very
two
different
different
paths
routes.
you can take.
Yeah, two different
Definitely.
paths, but both of you ended up senior in Pepsi, which is really cool to see. Taking different
Absolutely.
paths and being able to navigate your way up within the brand. Nala
Definitely.
actually has another question, which I love. So um, they said, I'm curious, back when you were a junior, did you envision yourself where you are now career-wise? And if not, what was different?
Gosh, okay. So when I first started as a junior, I was in agency world. And I will say that my agency experience was very different. It was very hands-on, design pitch oriented. So you were always pitching to big brands, working on the next big thing, big ideas. Um, it was a little bit less tangible, and I really liked the sort of hustle that happened in the agency world. And in that regard, I actually never expected to end up in a company like PepsiCo.
Hmm.
And in fact, when the opportunity arose, I was a little bit resistant and didn't think that I would fit in the corporate culture. However, when I interviewed, there were like 4 interviews within the process. And the last one was in the office, and I met a ton of the team. And I was like, you know what? This team is amazing, inspiring, and this is an environment that I want to work in. So that's when I kind of chose to move away from the agency side and step into this more corporate world. Um, and yeah, I would say that I guess they're they're very different spaces. But I guess I'd always kind of wanted to be that big picture kind of thinker. So I found my footing within PepsiCo, but I didn't never necessarily expected that from being a junior designer.
Mhm.
I think as a junior, I just wanted to find some sort of space within the creative industry that worked for me, and I didn't really know what that path looked like, to be honest
Mhm.
with you. Um,
I'm
but
gonna
again,
fold
I
that
did
in.
always want to sort of.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna fold that into and then Anthony, I'll get to your other question here in a second, but I'm gonna fold that into like how would you then take your experience and besides what you've already said and give recommendations to those who are just starting out their career. I mean, you said that you didn't really know that you wanted to be in corporate world, you didn't really know that you wanted to leave agency side, and yet here you are in an amazing job and happy, in your position. So how would somebody know even what to try out when there's a variety of
Mm,
different things and options and directions that they can go? How would you recommend that?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think after my first agency role, I did do a little bit of freelance for a little while, and I got to taste a few different types of design roles. And I think, again, it really comes back to being curious and not being afraid to sort of try different things that might not be right. And I think, especially at the start of your career, I mean, for me, what agency gave me was an experience on a lot of different brands and a lot of different sort of design experiences. And I think the main thing is just to be open. And like I said, I never expected to end up at PepsiCo, but I was open to it. And after interviewing and after sort of meeting the team, sometimes what you need to question is like, it's not, am I right for this role, but is this role right for me? And
Mm,
being able to ask a company, does this company give me what I am looking for within my design career? And maybe you don't know that, and that's okay. But I think sometimes we think like anything is better than nothing, or I should get this job because I need a job. And
right.
um I think you're always wanting to kind of like live up to what you're being asked in an interview or being expected from a company, but I think it's mutually exclusive. Like you really need to also be sort of inquiring to the company what they can give to you in your design path, or creative path.
Yeah, I think
And
it's
I
such a good
think that's the main thing.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was gonna say I think that's such a good reminder, especially for, especially coming from somebody who's working, with PepsiCo, because I think that you can be entering into or interviewing with a really large company, a really huge firm, right? And be thinking, my gosh, I just need to nail this interview and I should take it because, right? And what you're saying is actually every interview, even one with Pepsi, should be one that is two-way street. And you're thinking about whether that role is really right fit for you. And in this case, the
Is
answer
it
was
right for
yes, right?
you?
Yeah. Yeah.
The answer was yes. Initially, no. And then once, like I said, meeting the creatives and the other people on the team, I was like, well, actually, I do think there's something for this company to offer me. And I think that's really important to consider is what truly resonates with you as a creative. Like, don't just take a job because you feel like it's the right position that gives you this level up. I mean, sometimes maybe that's helpful. But kind of asking yourself, like, does this resonate with me? And will this build on the things that I consider important in my design career?
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've got just about, 10 minutes left. So I'm gonna, we have time for two or three more questions. I'm gonna start with Anthony's other question here, but for anybody else that's on the call that has, one or two burning questions in your mind, now's the time. Now's the last 10 minutes. You've got Hayley on the call, so good time to ask a couple questions if you've got them. So Anthony said, sorry, I have another question. What has been your experience working with product designers and a design team at PepsiCo? Could you share specific practices or behaviors from them that have proven valuable to you in your role as a design manager? I guess, how are you interacting with the product design and design team at Pepsi, and what behaviors have been helpful?
Sure. Gosh, I think every project at PepsiCo has been very different in the way that you engage with all of the different kind of cross-functional teams. Um, our product design team is actually quite small, so they're purely based in New York at the minute. And I think what you mean by product design would be more like the 3D product aspect,
Mm,
and product innovation aspect of the team. Um, I will say my current role is like is a lot less involved with that team. But in my experience in New York, we were a lot more synced up and we worked on a lot of innovation projects together. And I think again, it comes down to like the sort of fearlessness of reaching out to your contacts and like being able to have open conversations of like, personally, I don't know that much about 3D product design, but I would have a lot of personal calls, just kind of walking through what are you guys working on and how might that affect some of the work streams that I'm
mm,
working on. Um, and again, that's not been a big part of my role in my UK experience, but in the New York team, we were a lot closer I guess, on that front. So in the New York office, we do have like 3D printing and modeling machines and a whole 3D space, and they're very much working on sort of the structural elements and all of that. So it was a little bit more joined up then, but my experience has been a little bit further away from that recently. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, I think probably so. Thanks. Oh, Anthony said no, more like user experience.
okay. In term, I mean, UX design in terms of like digital and social experience.
Not completely
There's a
sure.
lot of
Anthony,
ways
I
you can
think
spin
you're gonna
it.
have to you're gonna have to clarify a little bit more, and then I'll come back to you once you have a clarified question. So digital experiences. Okay. Yeah,
Okay, I
Hayley,
can speak
unless
to
you got
digital.
great.
Yeah,
Let's do that.
definitely. Okay, so product is definitely different, I guess, than digital experience in our team. But um recently we have actually looked to bolster our team in the UK with more experiential digital sort of designers. And we have a couple of experts on the team, and that is actually a space that always has a big gap because the marketing team in PepsiCo has a big tendency to run off and develop stuff without our design and innovation team consultant or consultancy. So I've got a pretty talented animator on our team currently. And our biggest thing recently for that is really kind of without being asked, showing what we can do in social and digital and in terms of user experience, kind of like showing the marketing team what we could deliver for each project. So again, even if it's not in the scope that we're briefed to do, we will actually bring to the table, like, here's how this key visual that could show up in store, which is very basic. And in store, it's always about like print material, the billboards, the bus ads, the shelf strips that have printed text on them. Here's how you can take that idea and then translate that into a social and digital setting. And we've got an animation specialist on our team now who kind of develops that up for us. And yeah, we're always thinking about that actually as the forefront. And again, we've only got one person on the team so far that's working into that, but I'd say more and more the industry is building in that direction where we're needing more digital kind of expertise and looking for that kind of talent. So I was just on a call before this with our resource team, and everybody in the team across snacks, beverage, experience team is all asking for her time to help develop some more digital assets for each project.
Cool.
So it's a good question because it's very, very relevant at the minute.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. Nala has one more question here. I like we've got 2 or 3 people here that are asking a lot of questions. I love it. Not shy. So I think Nala is really interested to hear about a little bit more about what a senior, the senior design side of things. And curious to know, what does it mean to be senior on the design side? Like, does it mean, having more experience, taking on bigger projects, higher level projects? Does it mean just managing a big design team? Like, how exactly does that work?
Sure. To be honest with you, I think senior design role would come from experience. And I really think that it's almost purely that, like, no matter how big or small the clients, I think the number of years you have under your belt of working in the design industry, you will gain experience no matter what you're working on.
Mm.
And I think probably, I hate to say it, but the minimum is usually like 3 to 5 years. You can usually kind of fudge that if you've worked a lot in the first 3 years of your career. But I think it's just visibility to lots of different problems and kind of learning how to problem solve would be the biggest thing that differentiates from being a junior designer to a senior designer, is kind of just the level of different things you've had to kind of navigate. So it might vary again, company to company, like what would kind of make you a senior versus a junior. But yeah, I do think it just takes time and experience.
Great. And let's finish up with one last question. Big company like Pepsi, if somebody's wanting to work for Pepsi, an intern for Pepsi, do they need to have, 5, 10 internship experiences and under their belt, or, what would, if somebody doesn't, I guess a better question is, if somebody doesn't have an internship experience, how do they make their resume stand out?
Sure. So actually the internship programs at PepsiCo are being developed, kind of over the years. I think New York is probably the strongest internship program that we do have to date. We do have a strong partnership with FIT in New York. And so we do pick up students from the FIT program pretty easily. However, I think the internship programs are expanding. And I know for the UK, we're working on that right now. And I think, again, the biggest thing for us is really the curiosity and probably like big picture thinking more
Hmm.
so than in the detail design sort of portfolios. So we went to a new designers festival last year, and our team is not ready yet to start our internship program because we're still a relatively new team, but we
Right.
are starting to kind of navigate what we would look for in an intern. And I think one of the portfolios that stood out to us last year was one that really kind of spoke to consumer insights, big idea thinking, and didn't just harp on like, I've illustrated a thing and here's how I illustrated it, if you know what I mean. So
Right.
it was kind of looking for that big picture thinking and I guess the impact that you might see at the front page of a portfolio of they done a really ballsy project about Heineken and how Heineken might build a whole campaign around kind of raising awareness in a certain social climate. And I don't know, I think those big ideas were what we were really looking for internships
Hmm.
was, this person doesn't just focus in on the design details, but really has that big picture thinking. So yeah, I would say I think in PepsiCo our internship program is not 100% to where it is going to be in the future. But again, I think big picture thinking is the number one thing that we always look for, and it's the standout thing that we would look for in a portfolio.
Yeah. Makes sense. So you're not, so somebody needs to have the design skills, but you want to see that they can independently think about how to apply it, right? In a
Exactly.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Since we've got just 3 minutes left. Thank you so much for joining us for the call. Really appreciate it. This was awesome. It was really, really cool to hear like all these details from you. I'm gonna have Connie, if you can just repaste that last one on eligibility is great. Happy to have you, and we're gonna be putting this online afterwards. So, if anybody wants to look back at the questions or details, can do. Um, Thank you, Hayley, so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Really enjoyed it. Good
Awesome.
questions as well.
Yeah, good
Honestly,
questions. There were some
guys.
really good questions today. Yeah, loved it. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you all. Bye.